Shiloh Sanders had a significant injury to his shoulder. Based on video, it's likely his left shoulder, and is underwent surgery. That's going to take him out for, sounds like 6 months, or at least probably 4 months. Obviously, we don't have specifics. We haven't had confirmation. Dion's kind of in his own charades. But when you look at the video from him, like shadow boxing Garcia, whatever day it was, you can see that he's wearing a brace on his left arm. You can kind of see it like a black brace, like right here. That is usually for a dislocated shoulder and a torn labrum. Classically, guys wear those because it basically holds the ball. And if not, it just keeps popping out of the socket. When you have a labrum, think if I took my arm off and we looked at it, this would be noon, this would be 3, 6, and 9 in the back, like a clock. That would be how you would describe the labrum. Traditionally, we tear at noon, kind of towards 3 o'clock, the front part. But then a lot of times it has a tendency to shift to the back because that ball's kind of bouncing. And a lot of the times when that happens, yeah, you can see it right here. When he rotates on his left shoulder, you can see it. See it right there? It's very, you have to know what you're looking at if you see it. It's very quick. But when you have that, a lot of times the ball will bounce in the back and it starts to tear the back of the labrum, because the labrum is basically a ball holding in a socket, and it's a thick piece of cartilage that holds it like that. So what can happen is, if you start to tear, that ball tears out of the socket, well, it has to tear that in order for it to get out of the socket. Now, it will pop back in usually. Sometimes it needs help. But then a lot of times it starts bouncing out the back, and it starts to tear the back part of the shoulder, which is posterior. When that happens, there's so much instability. It's like you sitting on a bar stool that has 2 loose legs. Like, it's like super loose, but that's your shoulder. So you're trying to reach out and you can't stabilize it because there's so much instability. And a lot of times your upper back muscles will start to spasm, and a lot of things start to spasm because there's no stability in there. Now, when you do that, you usually have to literally repair. So you run a suture basically along whatever's torn. And sometimes you can even have a fracture where the ball, the rim pops off, or you get a little bit of the rim fractured off. That's what happened to Trevor Story of the Red Sox about a month ago or so. So you have the labral tear plus that fracture. I don't know what he had, but this would be different options that could lead to a longer recovery. The issue with these is you can't really push it faster than 6 weeks, because that repair will re-tear, and then you'll have to go back to the drawing board. So that's why you kind of have to let it heal up, stabilize it, then you can start testing it. And remember, if these guys have their arm out and trying to hit somebody because they can't, get a better angle, you're gonna have issues, and you're putting this in vulnerability again. So you don't want to go back before you're ready to go back. When your arms are close, you have your back, you have your core. But once your arms are extended, you're vulnerable. You don't have a choice. A lot of these guys are going to land funny, kind of land out, their hand, kind of fall and trying to, break their fall, or they're backpedaling and they don't really know what's behind them, which way they're going. Sometimes they're trying to get a guy and they may get leveled from the side. So they really have to be comfortable before they can get back. I think if he can make it back for at least half the season, then maybe he has a chance to get drafted on the higher side. But if this knocks him out for a lot of the season, or if they just, he doesn't play well, this could be a big deal.
Let me ask you something. How do you sustain that injury most likely as a football player? And we're teaching tackling, and I watched some practices. There's a hit where he hits a kid late in practice from a month ago. We showed that. Whistle blew. He kept going, hit a guy. A lot of guys I'm seeing in practice dropping their eyes, and it's all shoulder. I've been watching a lot of shoulder getting hit. Yep. Is that?
Yeah, let me show you. Let me get my model here.
All right.
So I got my buddy here.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So traditionally, when you land on your shoulder, think Anthony Richardson last year for the Colts, land on your shoulder, and you can separate these ligaments that hold the AC. This is the AC joint. You can separate the AC joint, and this is annoying. Most of the guys, miss a couple of weeks and they're okay. He had a bad one, so he had to miss the rest of the season. But that's not the joint we're talking about here. We're talking about this one. So what happens is, you can see it's basically floating in there. There's really nothing holding it on except for that labrum. So if you think if you land and you clear and you literally land flat, and this, think about where, think about how much force, or if you're running into someone and you basically use your shoulder to kind of hit them, then and that's in isolation, especially some of these big guys, think about how much vulnerability. Now, the more you have your arm out, the more vulnerable that joint's going to become, and then you had the poor thing that happened with the YouTube star for the XFL, where he kind of used his head, and now you're talking about fracturing stuff up here, right? So there's a fickle beast. So a lot of this has to do with really talking about proper tackling technique, right? No longer spearing guys, but also not isolating neck and also not isolating your shoulder. Now, a lot of guys, especially the D linemen or a lot of the high-level linebackers or DTs, when they're trying to almost clothesline someone, they'll have their arm extended, and you'll see that the pec actually attaches right here, and sometimes what happens is it pulls and it tears, and that's why they get the pec tear. You probably remember TJ Watt suffering that, or a partial tear, and that's the reason why, is because their arm's extended, and that pec tendon is vulnerable. And that,
especially when you drop your head, Jock. You drop your head,
yeah.
and this is what your shoulders do.
Yeah. So you're putting it, especially if it's already been hit, once that, so that the data at 18, if you've dislocated your shoulder, you have an injury to the labrum. There's no question. At 18, there's 100% chance of redislocation. That's what the data shows, or like 90 something. It's crazy. It's super high. As you get older, 30s, 40s, 50s, the risk of re-injury is much lower. But at 18, 19, 20, especially someone who's like this, a very high level athlete, that's it. You don't have a choice. And the problem is, excuse me, when everything's super unstable in there, you start rubbing, this ball starts rubbing the cup, so to speak, and then starts wearing down the cartilage. And that's what we see as arthritis. You start to see cartilage. And that's not common in the shoulder. And except you have a fracture, you have a dislocation, you're a baseball pitcher, or something like that, where there's a lot of instability. I inject these. This is what I inject a lot of these. But a lot of the times, when you have a bad tear, 6 hours, 8 hours, like almost a full thickness tear, they take the kitchen sink, and sometimes they're still not stable, especially if they have a little lesion or a little, what we call bony Bankart, that kind of fracture, or if they have a little cartilage injury. Like, there's a lot of variables to this. Without your shoulder, you're useless, right?
Is that similar to AD? You saw him get shot from the grassy knoll the other day for the Lakers, and he got hit in his shoulder. And
he has a history of dislocation. I did not see that one, but I heard about it. He does have a history of dislocations, for what I understand. My guess is he retweaked it, and as a result, there's only so much you can do, because there's going to be pain, there's going to be inflammation. And again, if you're close, your arms are close, you're okay. But once your arms are extended, you're vulnerable. So like, you can't really shoot like this, right? And you can't really block like this. You can't defend like this. So you're it's like you got a broken wing. If you're a bird, you really can't. You're useless. And you think you can't even open a door without extending, because you're going to hit yourself in the face. So you really have to extend. And extending requires rotator cuff, but also requires that stability of that labrum. So that's the tricky part with labrums of the shoulder or the hip. The shoulders are probably more frustrating.
Doc, here's what it is. So I got this DM this morning. Give me a call, and I said, so I asked him what it was about. He told me it was related or correlated to what you are referring to right here. This is what the man said. I'm the one who published the Shiloh story. I said, okay, nice. How can I help? He said, I stand by the report 100%. We have 3 sources who've confirmed it, and Deion's our guy and did not deny it.